something powerful about being a woman in the will of God. There is something undeniable about the way heaven leans in when a woman is aligned, postured, and prepared for divine release. Today, I came to speak to the woman who has been overlooked, who has been tested in secret, and who has carried silent battles with grace. I came to speak to the woman who feels like she's been hidden, not realizing that hiddenness is not punishment, but preparation. When God is about to bless a woman, it is not quiet. It is not subtle. It is prophetic. The spiritual realm begins to respond to her name before the natural catches up. And if you are discerning the shift, feeling the stretching, sensing the stirring, then sis, God is already moving. This word is for you. You're not crazy. You're not overthinking. There are signs, there are prophetic markers. And when they begin to manifest, they announce that heaven is about to make a public move for a private vessel. Let me walk you through 7 prophetic signs that God is about to bless a woman in a big, undeniable way. She begins to experience unusual isolation and separation. It's not something she planned. It's not something she even asked for. Suddenly, the same spaces that once felt like home feel foreign. The friendships that once poured life into her now feel distant or even strained. Conversations feel misaligned. Invitations stop coming. Texts go unanswered. And she starts wondering if she did something wrong. But what she doesn't realize is that God is being intentional. Heaven has decided to call her into a divine separation, not as a punishment, but as a protection. There's something about separation that prepares a woman for transformation. God does his most intimate work in the quiet. He does his most transformative shaping in the hidden place. And when God is about to bless a woman in a big way, he begins by pulling her away from the noise. He removes her from voices that can't speak to her next. He distances her from people who only saw her as she was, not who she's becoming. Because the blessing that is coming requires her to see herself differently. And before God shifts her surroundings, he shifts her solitude. It is in this isolation that the woman begins to hear more clearly. At first, it feels like loss. It feels like rejection. It feels like confusion. But it's a divine filter. God is filtering out every influence that could distort her clarity. He is fine-tuning her spiritual hearing. He is making sure that when he speaks next, she doesn't confuse his voice with anyone else's. Because what he is about to release requires obedience without distraction. And this is where the woman begins to wrestle. Because the flesh longs for comfort, for connection, for familiarity. But the spirit is being summoned to something higher. So while she misses the laughter of old friendships, something in her spirit knows she is not being left behind. She is being lifted. While others are gathering, she is being gathered by the Lord. There is a divine loneliness that signals divine favor. Because what God is cultivating in her cannot be diluted by casual access. He is calling her to be set. This is the pattern of preparation that marks every woman who is about to be blessed in a way that shifts destinies. Look at the stories of women God used in Scripture. Esther had to be isolated in the palace before she stepped into purpose. Ruth had to walk away from everything familiar before she walked into Boaz's field. Mary had to carry the greatest promise in secret before the world ever celebrated her. Separation is never random. It is always prophetic. And in this isolation, God begins to refine her appetite. She no longer hungers for what she used to crave. The things that used to entertain her now seem shallow. The validation she used to seek now seems unnecessary. She is not becoming boring, she is becoming holy. God is reordering her desires to match the level of the blessing. Because a woman cannot carry a big blessing with small appetite. Her hunger must grow deeper. Her spirit must crave the things of God. And so he weans her off the superficial to prepare her for the supernatural. This is also where the woman begins to notice an unusual sensitivity. Her spirit picks up on things others ignore. She becomes grieved by what she once tolerated. She discerns heaviness in rooms that look normal. She notices spiritual warfare disguised as casual conversation. This sensitivity is not a burden, it is an upgrade. God is heightening her awareness to protect what she's about to carry. Because the blessing isn't just for her enjoyment, it's for kingdom advancement. And with greater blessing comes greater stewardship. In this place of divine isolation, the woman also begins to feel a stripping. God begins removing not just people, but things, habits, mindsets, even opportunities. At first, it feels unfair. Why would God close a door she was excited about? Why would he deny her something she prayed for? But again, it's protection. He is pruning her so that when the blessing comes, it doesn't crush her. So that when favor falls, she can stand under its weight. She doesn't know it yet, but every no is making room for a greater yes. There's a moment in every chosen woman's life where it feels like everyone is walking out, and yet God hasn't walked in the way she expected. It's that in-between space, the hallway between closed doors and open ones, that becomes the holy ground of transformation. It's in that space where God begins to reveal her identity apart from roles, titles, or affirmation. When the noise is gone, she hears the truth. Not the version of her that people celebrated, but the version God always knew. She realizes her identity isn't built in proximity to people. It's rooted in proximity to purpose. And this realization only comes when the familiar is stripped away. You see, when God is about to bless a woman in a big way, he isolates her so she doesn't misattribute the blessing to anyone else. He makes it clear that what is coming didn't come from connection, favor with man, or perfect timing. It came from him and him alone. Isolation teaches dependence, and dependence births revelation. In this season, her conversations with God shift. No longer surface level prayers. These are deep cries, groanings that words cannot express. Her tears become prayers. Her silence becomes surrender. Her weariness becomes worship. She is learning the language of the secret place. Because God is not just preparing her to receive something big, he is preparing her to become someone new. And new wine cannot go in old wineskins. The old must break, the known must fall away. Even in this hiddenness, God begins to introduce her to her own strength. The kind of strength she didn't know she had. The kind of endurance that was buried under years of people-pleasing and self-doubt. She starts realizing that her voice matters, that her presence shifts atmospheres, that she's not invisible, she's in incubation. She's not being ignored, she's being equipped. God is building her in private so that when he blesses her publicly, she doesn't crumble under the weight of influence. She starts seeing signs of divine patterns. Little confirmations that she is not alone, even if she feels lonely. Maybe it's a verse that jumps out at her like it was written just for her. Maybe it's a prophetic dream. Maybe it's someone she hasn't spoken to in years reaching out with a word that hits exactly where she is. These are the whispers of God in the silence. reminders that he hasn't forgotten his focus. He's watching every step, counting every tear, and orchestrating every detail. The unusual separation also begins to highlight what was never real. Relationships that were built on need instead of covenant begin to fade. Connections that were transactional fall apart. But rather than chasing what's leaving, she starts to realize that some exits are necessary for her elevation. There's no resentment, only revelation. She doesn't mourn the loss as much as she once would because she now understands that everything God removes is something that can survive where she's going. And this is where a holy boldness begins to rise in her. She may still feel fragile, but she's not fearful. She may be alone, but she's aligned. She's no longer afraid to walk away from what doesn't match her destiny. She no longer explains or defends her boundaries. She no longer asks for permission to become who she was always meant to be. This kind of clarity only comes through separation. This kind of identity only emerges when the world's definition falls away and all that remains is God's truth. Even her dreams begin to shift. She starts dreaming bigger, deeper, clearer. Not just about what she wants, but about who she's becoming. Not just about success, but about legacy. Not just about breakthrough, but about impact. She begins to dream with God, to co-labor with heaven, to envision a life not rooted in survival, but significance. And that kind of dreaming requires the womb of stillness. Because when God plants something eternal in you, he doesn't allow it to be polluted by premature. And yes, the enemy tries to attack her mind in this season. He whispers lies. You're being punished. You're forgotten. You're not enough. But now she's discerning. She doesn't just hear the lie. She confronts it with truth. She recognizes that her warfare is proof of her worth. That isolation is not the absence of God's hand. It's the presence of his preparation. She is no longer intimidated by the silence. She is aware that heaven is building her faith muscle behind the veil. There comes a point in the separation where she doesn't just endure it, she begins to embrace it. Her posture shifts from complaint to curiosity. She stops asking, why is this happening to me? And begins to ask, what is God revealing in this? Her heart turns from resistance to surrender. That's when the true transformation begins. Because now, she's not just surviving the season, she's stewarding it. She's letting the isolation do its work. She's letting the solitude stretch her. She's allowing the silence to sharpen her sensitivity to the Spirit. And it's here in this sacred, quiet space that God begins to download vision. Not ideas, not ambitions, vision. Heaven-sent blueprints. Strategies wrapped in silence. Clarity that doesn't come from man, but from intimacy. She starts to see with spiritual eyes. She understands that the separation wasn't to isolate her from love. It was to expose her to truth. She wasn't being distanced from people. She was being drawn to the throne. And now she walks differently. Not in pride, but in purpose. Not with fear, but with fire. The blessing God is preparing for her isn't just about her name being known. It's about heaven being glorified through her life. So she has to be rooted. She has to be clear. She has to be stable. And isolation does that. It kills the need to be seen. It refines the desire to be approved by others. It trains her to walk by faith, not applause. Because when she walks into that blessing, into that new realm, that elevation, that answered prayer, she can't afford to lose herself in the crowd. She must remember who she is and who sent her. And so the Spirit begins to deal with her foundation, the parts of her that no one sees, the silent insecurities, the hidden fears, the unhealed wounds, the old narratives that still play in the background. It's a cleansing season, a stripping season, a revealing season, but it's all for the rebuilding. God cannot place a heavy anointing on a cracked identity. He must restore the woman before he releases the reward. So in this season of isolation, he touches every broken place with grace. He heals what she's hidden. He restores what she lost. This is where forgiveness begins to flow freely. Not because she got an apology, not because someone made it right, but because she's been in the presence of God long enough to realize that she can carry old pain into a new promise. That bitterness cannot build blessing. So she lets go, she releases, she forgives, she blesses her enemies and prays for her accusers, and suddenly the atmosphere around her shifts. The spiritual fog lifts. Because forgiveness opens the door to favor. Forgiveness clears the soil so the blessing can take root. Even her language begins to change. She no longer talks like a victim of her season, she talks like a student of it. She speaks what God says, even if her feelings disagree. She declares favor when she sees lack. She speaks peace when chaos tries to rise. She decrees breakthrough when the door is still closed. Her words begin to carry weight because they are shaped by the word. She understands that her tongue is not just for conversation, it's for creation. And so, even in her solitude, she prophesies. She begins to walk with an authority that doesn't match her circumstances. And people notice. Some don't understand it. They don't know what she's been through in the dark. They don't know about the night she cried herself to sleep. They don't know about the prayers that had no words, but God knows, and he's honoring her private pursuit with public power. The woman who was hidden is now glowing. The woman who was isolated is now. The woman who was in waiting is now walking in the wind of God. There is a quiet confidence rising in her. She no longer rushes the process. She no longer resents the pruning. She has tasted the faithfulness of God in the fire, and now she trusts him with the flood. She doesn't need to force anything. She doesn't need to chase what is leaving. She knows that what is for her cannot miss her, and what misses her was never meant to stay. This kind of discernment only comes through divine separation. This kind of strength is not taught, it is birth. Now her time in separation starts to reveal its true value. It becomes more than just a pause. It becomes a portal, a divine invitation, a sacred encounter. She realizes that she wasn't just being protected from others, she was being positioned by God. What looked like a setback was really a set up. What felt like abandonment was actually a realignment. Because in isolation, she didn't just meet herself. She encountered the God who sees her. She now understands that intimacy with God is the greatest gift isolation can give. It was never about the pain, it was about proximity. God was always after her heart, not her platform, not her performance, her heart. And in this place, she surrenders fully, not halfway, not conditionally. She lays down her timeline, her expectations, her desires. And she picks up trust, deep, unshakable trust. Trust that doesn't need to see to believe. Trust that rests even when nothing makes sense. The woman who once questioned her worth now walks with knowing, not arrogance, anointing, not ego. Encounter. There's a weight to her presence now, a stillness, a purity. You can feel that she's been with God, not just visiting his presence, but living in it, not just quoting scriptures, but carrying revelation. And this makes her dangerous to the kingdom of darkness because now her isolation has turned into impartation. She has received something in secret that she will now carry in the open. The enemy regrets letting her sit in silence because in that silence, she remembered who she was. She remembered the promises. She remembered the power in her praise. She remembered the weapon of her worship. And now she's not coming out the same. She's coming out with oil, pressed but full, broken but bold, hidden but held. And there's nothing the enemy can do to stop what's about to pour from her life. Everything about her is shifting. Her eyes see differently. Her spirit picks up what her mind cannot explain. Her steps are ordered. Her thoughts are renewed. Her company is divine. She's no longer available to what drains her. She's no longer addicted to what distracts her. She has no tolerance for what dishonors her purpose because she's been in the presence of truth. And when a woman knows truth, she's not easy to deceive. She can't be flattered into compromise. She can't be guilted into settling. She's been marked. This is when the divine connections start to appear. Not many, but meaningful. Not loud, but loyal. God begins to bring people who carry keys, not chains. People who fan her flame, not dim her fire. People who recognize her oil and don't compete with her calling. Because now she's ready. She won't misuse her access. She won't undervalue her voice. She knows that favor is not just a gift, it's a responsibility. And as the signs begin to align, she no longer doubts that the blessing is near. The things she once begged for are now pursuing her. The doors she once knocked on are now opening on their own. But she's not surprised. She's not desperate. She's ready because she knows this blessing didn't come cheap. It cost her something. It cost her comfort. It cost her applause. It cost her assumptions. But what she gained in isolation, intimacy, identity, authority, no one can take from her.